Hey, everybody. Welcome to Rock and Roll Confessional. I am CW.
Hello, CW. I'm Rita Wild.
Hello, Rita Wild. Nice to see you. Although no one else can see you, but I can see you.
Good. That's okay. Here we go again.
So, Reach, do you remember the first time you went to an in-store, which you were probably a fan? It was probably before radio, or maybe not.
I don't remember. To be honest, I don't remember.
Really?
Yeah, honestly. It had to have been somewhere, in Southern California. So, I remember going to some Hall of Fame star inductions, like Crosby, Stills, Nash and stuff like that. But
that's cool.
I can't remember in stores, except
Really?
for what I did when I was with radio. Yeah.
Okay, what was that one?
I don't remember that. The first one.
You just said you remembered it.
Well, I do remember vaguely. I would think something like, The Alarm or Pat Benatar, I think we did. Or Quarter Flash was one that we did.
Okay.
So.
Well, I think I talked about mine before, which was Ted Nugent, where the two girls in front of me popped open their tops and had Teddy sign their coworkers. And that was all before I was in radio. And then I think right after that was Boz Gags did one up in Northern California. So I went to get my Silk Degrees album signed by him there. Yeah. But I used to love that when just go down, camp out for a couple hours and then zip in line and meet your favorite rock star. I mean, that was awesome. Anyway, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. You want to intro?
I think that, it's important to note that the connection we had with Rand and the connection we have with many of the guests that we have is music. So, whatever form that takes, whether it's a live show, whether it's something that you listen to that's recorded, or if you go to the actual place. For me, going to record stores was just like this nirvana. It was like this place where I was understood. It's a language I understood, and everybody. And that's why I still go to record stores all the time. And that's why I thought it'd be great to talk with a guy who owns a record store, a local record store that's of world renown. It's not every day that you can say, let's go to this place because everybody around the world knows it. But we do. We're that lucky.
Yeah. So we are going to speak with Rand Foster, who owns a local record store in Long Beach, where Rita and I live. He started the store, in the 90s, I think?
In the 90s. I think it was open first on 2nd Street. It's just Belmont Shore. It's just a great place. You just walk, and it's beach vibe and friendly, and that's where he opened the store. And somebody told me about it, and I said, okay, I got to go down and check it out. And I did, and I loved it. And then they moved to this other place on 4th Street, which I don't know. It's just more comfortable vibe. It's, more air to breathe. And
it's spacious. The previous store was quite small.
In our interview with Rand, he talks about some of the restrictions of that. But we talk about, opening the store, his love of music, the struggles of opening a store, and then the struggles of running a store, like, say, during the pandemic. Record Store Day, which is coming up. It's awesome. And the musical acts that he has had play at his shop over the years, which is pretty impressive. I mean, the first half, he's going to talk about some of them, like Taylor Swift, who didn't do an in-store, but has always supported local record stores. Foo Fighters, which was the most amazing one that they had.
I wish I could have been there.
I know. I thought, man, I should call. And it's like, nah, there's no way I would get through. And then mutual friend of ours, Bill McDermott, took his son down there and they just got in. It was like, it was insane. It was like, okay. If
Bill was very wily at those things.
Yeah. But I mean, I forget some of the instances and circumstances around that. But now when I listen to it, I realize why I didn't go, because it was so Long Beach crazy at that time.
Yeah.
But he's just a wonderful person. And I really enjoyed his stories.
Yeah, he's got some great stories. So here we go with our conversation with Fingerprints record store owner, Rand Foster.
Hello to Rand Foster. He's the owner of Fingerprints Records in Long Beach, which has got a brand new website, and it's all, you can get it from wherever you want, all over the country. So we'll talk a lot about that. But I just thought today we'd have a conversation just to talk about friends, fans of music stores, record stores,
Vinyl.
and of music, because that's how we all became associated. For me, the record store was always my gathering place. It was like a place where I could go and I could connect with people who thought the same way that I did about music and had that same passion. And, it was the information network at the time. So I don't know. Why did you go to record stores?
It was very similar, except I felt maybe a little less community just because I felt very uncool as a kid. So it was a place that was accepting, and it was a place that nobody gave me a hard time, and I could, I was very big on the bargain bin. So I was constantly just reading liner notes and trying to find, a side guy or somebody whose name I recognized. And it was just this, incredible archaeological, exploratory, just discovery. And being a kid with a budget and not a big social calendar, it was kind of the place I went to.
How about you, Deb?
Yeah, I was going to say that there was a shop right down the street from where I lived, and it was completely run. This was in the late 60s, and it was completely run by hippies. And I think there was a little, head shop in there, and they had stickers and the velvet blacklight posters. And, they just kind of sat around, and it was very, very chill. But I just remember going in there and just picking through the records. And I didn't know that much as a kid, but I remember that was the time that my grandmother actually stepped into the record store with me to buy my first Monkees album for me. It was a trip having her in there, being in her probably 50s or so at that time, and taking her into that shop with all the hippies. But we managed to come out alive.
Oh, that's good.
How about you, Reeds?
One of my favorite places. Well, I had the good fortune of my sister. I'm the youngest of four, and so I got handed down a lot of music and stuff. Living in Germany for a while, I was just tuned into the radio, and I would get, stations like Radio Luxembourg, and at that time AM was big, so like WLS and stations in New York. Actually, KRLA in Pasadena, I got one night, but. Record stores, my sister worked in like a Music Plus or something like that. So she would always bring me home some stuff. And so that was a great way of doing it. But, I had all my copies of Rolling Stone magazine, just read, magazines as about as much as I could do. With my FFB, my fast fun brain, my ADD, HD, whatever it is, not books, but magazines, and same thing as Rand, just, like it was like archaeological thing. Oh my God, that guy's in this band and he played on this album, he played on this album. It's like, oh my God. And then it's like, you look at the labels, and everything to me was about the album art, reading everything. Loved it when they included the lyrics.
Yes.
There was a place when we moved to California called the Record Trading Center. And I think it was originally on Chapman Avenue in Orange. But it was just like this funky old building, and it was just so great. They had moved over to Tustin Avenue, I think. And, that was like my go-to place, but just wherever I could drive. Tower Records, if I was able to drive at that time. Just wherever I could go to find out about music. It was just, like you said, it was a comforting place. It was my Mecca. It's like, everything makes sense here. It wasn't at school. It wasn't anywhere else. It was in that record store.
I felt the same way, and it was exactly that. And it was, the gamut from local stores to, like you said, Tower Records, where, in my mind, the coolest people in the world worked at Tower Records, because that was such an unattainable thought that, I could work at a Tower Records. I mean, I was in my late 20s before I ever worked in a record store. It just never occurred to me that I knew enough, to, work with these people who are just these, fonts of knowledge.
Well, how did you get turned on to music? Were you a musician at all? Did you play music? Or
I wasn't. It was really, my parents both played a lot of music. As a kid, entertainment sometimes included pushing back the couch and having a dance party in the living room. It was that kind of thing. And then, my friends got into it, and they had older siblings. And then it was, I got a transistor radio that was shaped like Donald Duck, and it was under my pillow every night. And, I was hearing all the young dudes, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? This is so, and just remember these, amazing songs that, just came out of nowhere, or came out of Donald Duck's head, I guess. But So so it was that. I never played. I jokingly tell people that I play records when they ask if I play music, because that's the extent of it. But yeah, it's been enough. I've it's too much of my time, I think.
Do you have a big collection?
I have a pretty big collection. Yeah, I mean, I had a huge collection. I grew up in Northern California, and when I moved down here, I had a fairly ridiculous collection. And then when I opened the store, that became kind of our starting inventory, because I was like, well, you kind of have to go all in. I held some back, but that was kind of my investment in being able to open a business was, my collection. And I'd bought a friend's collection and knew a guy who, he was on a promo list. So he had a lot of the current stuff. And that was what we opened with. So, I went over to CDs about that time because they were convenient and available. Then my son actually got back into vinyl, and I'd started picking some up. Well, I guess that's not true. I had a good collection again, but then he got into it and kind of just got me fired back up again.
Nice.
How difficult was it to make that decision to open your own record store? I mean, that's something that I think, everybody contemplates, maybe, at least probably the three of us did. But
if we have enough crap in our house.
It's it was interesting. It was done by degrees. At the time, I worked for a chain of record stores called Moby Disc.
Oh yeah.
And one of the guys I worked with, his uncle, I believe it was the owner, and he had gone and opened his own store and was calling and asking me for advice very regularly. And out of that, him and his partners just were super encouraging. You should do this. You should have your own store. And I kind of started the process of looking into it. And made some baby steps toward it. I'd found a location that I thought was kind of cool, and I, checked to see what the rent was, and, was doing kind of those early formative steps. And then he went to his cousin or uncle or whoever, the relation was, and said, "Hey, I think Rand's opening his own store." So they fired me. And I was like, well, I guess I got to open a store now. So, it kind of, it kind of worked out, but it was one of those, I needed a little push, and he provided it without even knowing it. So,
yeah, that's great. When it comes to your current record store, Fingerprints, which is at 420, I thought that's just ironic, 424th Street in Long Beach, you walk in and it has just such a different vibe. It feels like home. It's very comfortable. You sell books there. You have a place to sit and read. You have all sorts of every kind of music in LPs, CDs, cassettes. I've even seen there, sing, so forth. So how do you keep your inventory stocked, and how do you get turned on to new music?
Inventory is... new product is easy, right? There's, we deal with all the major labels. We deal with, one-stop distributors. There's a lot of sources for new release product. Used product over the years, I think we've just built up a reputation as being a place that we buy collections, we pay fairly, and we, have built a clientele of people who either, are selling a collection or are just freshening up their collection. Especially with coronavirus right now, a lot of people have been doing the A to Z, going through trying to play all their records, which is really cool that people are doing it and finding these old records they forgot about, but also they're finding records that maybe they realize they don't need anymore. And so we're seeing a lot of that stuff show up in the bins now. So it's a lot of that second and third, less common record by an artist you may love that somebody else has been sitting on and not playing, and all of a sudden it's back in the market again. So
what do you use as a price gauge on the used merchandise?
There's a website called Discogs. It's a selling site, and it's a place that a lot of people use to sell their collection, but it also gives some historical information. So it's become kind of the go-to place for, a lot of it's knowledge and knowing what something is and what the demand is, because obviously there's a lot of regional aspects that come into play where, a Blasters record is a big deal in Long Beach. It might not be as big of a deal in Florida,
right,
or some market that they didn't tour as much. And,
a lot of the West Coast LA punk.
Exactly. Yeah.
Bigger here.
So, any resource like that is just a guide, but they do have some interesting historical median price, low price, high price kind of information that we use kind of as a starting point, and then kind of use kind of our experience and knowledge to kind of adjust.
I remember being in the store a couple of years ago, just milling about, and I heard a couple of the employees talking about the big record stash that had just come in, and some guy said, yeah, it's Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes. Is that true?
It is. Chris is a very avid record collector. And so apparently, and I heard this from his PA, so I've actually never met Chris, but his PA said that, when they're out on tour, that's what Chris does for fun, is he has fans that will bring boxes of records to shows. He's just always out getting records. And I guess he kind of was constantly upgrading. So he actually was the first person and it makes sense, but he was the first time somebody really articulated to me that your shelf is finite. And so that, when you reach the point where the shelf is full, something's got to go, which is a really difficult way to collect anything. And I've been very unsuccessful at it. But it was interesting to see that was kind of his methodology, that, if he got a record he wanted more than this other one, that one made it into the trade-in pile. So yeah, so he did that quite a few times when he was living down here. He's up in the Bay Area now, I think. So somebody up there is getting those records. But yeah, it was pretty exciting the first time it came in.
How is vinyl doing over CDs lately? It seems like CDs are kind of, hate to say it, burning out, and digital's kind of taking over.
Going into coronavirus, if you'd asked me a year ago, I think I would have felt that CDs were on the verge of having a resurgence, kind of like vinyl did. I think all the factors were in place. There was a lot of product in the marketplace. The price was really cheap. And I think for vinyl, that's how a lot of kids got into vinyl, because for $100, you could, hit a garage sale and buy 100 records. Whereas if you go to a store to buy CDs, at that point, they were $16 to $18. You're talking 4 or 5 CDs.
Right.
It's way out of a kid's budget. And then parents had collections in the garage still. So I think that was a lot of where in my mind, that was a big factor in vinyl's resurgence, was that the kids embraced it and it became this kind of cultish, fatty thing. And fortunately, it's stuck around, and it's managed to survive. And I kind of felt like all of the elements were in place for CDs to have a similar kind of resurgence. But I think Corona's kind of taken some of the wind out of that, because it's almost reached a tipping point of too much stuff. And the core clientele for CDs right now is an older demographic, which is also people who are rightly making the decision to be a little less exposed to the public. So we're seeing a little bit of a drop off on CD sales. Hopefully it will bounce back when, people feel more secure and, a little safer going outside. But
who's buying the vinyl? And I'm not just the old, but also the new stuff.
It really is cross-generational. It's and cross-gender. I mean, it's everybody is buying vinyl, from, people who remember buying Beatles picture sleeves and were kids buying records at 88 cents at the drugstore, to kids that are into, Tyler, the Creator, and, the Charlie XCX, and these really hot kind of more pop leaning artists, Lana Del Rey and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So huge numbers, even getting into, some of the artists that, to my mind, really skew younger, which is Taylor Swift. For the last several years has been doing vinyl releases, which at first I was like, this isn't a demo that's interested in vinyl. And I, very happily am wrong, because she sells a lot of records.
Oh my God. Yes. Especially when they're autographed, which is something that was nicely done that she did, I think, for like a lot of independent record stores.
She did. Taylor has been a very unexpected ally for indie retail. She came forward. There's a record store in Nashville called Grimey's that's a great store. And when COVID hit, she came forward, and I don't know the exact details, but I know she paid for their rent and maybe some of the other kind of operating expenses for, I don't know what the period was, but it was they were like, we didn't even know Taylor Swift knew we existed. And she came in and just, basically covered their rent and some of their expenses for several months to just kind of help them get through, which I thought was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And then we got a call that was like, hey, Taylor signed a bunch of CDs. Would you like some? And it's like, absolutely. And it's, it's done several things. It's brought a lot of younger kids into the store that are very excited, which is awesome to see just anecdotally, but it's also bringing them into a store and giving them an experience and giving them something that, they're going to have and cherish for hopefully a very long time. And then, the sales have been just kind of a bit of a boon as well. So it's been really nice. It's a very cool thing she's done. And, kind of like Grimey's, it's nice to know that she knew we were out here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
One thing that has always separated Fingerprints from some of the other stores are the record store day in stores. You, and not only on record store day, you've done it throughout the year. You have special guests come in and sing and play. And why don't you tell us about some of the special guests that have played on day or coming in during the regular part of the year?
We have been so incredibly fortunate. We talked about Tower Records, and you talked about being able to drive there. And I remember I must have been maybe a sophomore in high school. And I remember taking a 2-hour bus ride because Pat Travers was at Tower Records signing the Boom Boom Out Go the Lights record. And I got to talk to him, and I was just like, this is so cool that this is a thing. And, then years later, I saw Go Boy up in Redondo Beach did an in-store. And I was like, wow, a band could play in a record store. And then working at Moby Disc, I was constantly, can we do this? Can we do this? And they felt it was disruptive and never really embraced it to the degree I wanted to. So when I got my store, I had very simple goals. I wanted to get through the first year of business because I'd heard that was the hardest, which is kind of funny. And then I wanted to get a record award with the store's name on it. And I wanted John Wesley Harding to play at the store. And those were my 3 business goals, being, aiming very high there. And so from the very beginning, that was something I wanted to do just because I wanted to be immersed in that. I wanted to be part of it and, part of the show. And, we've been incredibly lucky. We've had the Foo Fighters played our first record store day in our 4th Street space.
Okay, time. Foo Fighters playing your store.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? How many people were calling you up saying, Grant, can you get me in? Can you get me in? Can you get me in?
How many best friends did you make?
Interestingly, the phone calls I remember were from the city.
Worrying about a riot. Another Depeche Mode at the warehouse on La Cienega back in the 80s.
I will tell you that was part of my thought process, and it was part of the conversation. They actually called me up. So it was the same weekend as Grand Prix. And we had we opened the store in February, and it was this first or second week of April. So we'd only been open for 2 months. Foo Fighters reached out and said, hey, do you want to do this? And we were like, yes, of course. And so we went and we got our entertainment permit, which is, it's a conditional, you just get it for the day kind of thing. And we filled out the paperwork, and I called them, as I was ready to hit send on the press release, and said, I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. And they said, oh yeah, no, it's all good. We got it. I said, okay, perfect. Hit the press release. The phone rings. Hey, we didn't know it was the Foo Fighters. And I was like, well, there wasn't a place. This is a city, yeah. And I said, well, there wasn't a place on the form for me to put that it was the Foo Fighters, which there is now. And so they said, it was a Friday. And they said, hey, on Monday, we are going to have a call with, fire department, police department, special events, permitting, mayor's office. I mean, there was 7 different city departments that were going to be on this call. And I said, no problem. That's fine. And at this point, I mean, this was so many leagues bigger than anything we had ever done that my need to what if this to death, had kept me up for several nights in a row thinking about things like the Depeche Mode warehouse event. And,
oh, yeah.
And so they started asking me questions, and they asked all the questions for all the things that had kept me up at night, and I already had an answer for them. And they came back and were like, "Yeah, okay, we're okay with it. We'll give it a try." And Foo Fighters were amazing. Fire Marshal was there, and PD were there, and we brought them in, and they were like, "This is incredible." Fire Marshal let us bring a few extra people in. Oh. Because, we picked a fairly low number just to make sure there was nobody had any reason to feel like it was unsafe. And he was like, yeah, you know what? There's so much room, and you've got great exits, and there's, yeah, that's fine. So I think it ended up being about 300 people that got to see the show. And it was, it was full on. It was, they brought in, I asked at one point, I said, can I help, set up this snake you're running here? And they said, oh no, there's only one member of our crew who's covered by the insurance company to touch that. It's $100,000 cable. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go stand over here. Yeah. You guys do what you need to do. And it was amazing. And they played, the whole Wasting Light record.
Wow.
and just start to finish, they rolled up in the white limousine, the SST license plate. And, they got out in front of the crowd and, everybody was like, woo, going crazy. And they, walked the line and, shook hands and high-fived. And it was, people were like, you don't have a barricade up. Aren't you worried about people getting on the stage? And I was like, can you control yourself? And they were like, well, yeah. I'm like, we'll be okay. I mean, it was, and it was exactly that. I mean, it was, everybody was, I think, so in awe that they were able to be at this thing that it just was, it was incredible. It was really, really magical.
And I'd forgotten the fact that it was also Long Beach Grand Prix. And for somebody who's never been to the Long Beach Grand Prix, that's like
stay away.
It's like Mardi Gras. But I think you guys started later in the afternoon, but still with parking down there. That's amazing that you pulled that off.
I think we did it. It was early afternoon. I'm like maybe 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock or something. But but I remember when Dave was a little late getting there, and he drove up on his motorcycle, and then I saw that he had written directions from his house to the store on his arm so he could see him while he was riding his motorcycle, which somebody got a photo of and sent to me. I have it somewhere, but I was just like, how great is that Dave Grohl has directions to my store on his arm? And then
Wait, if you go backwards, can you get to his house?
It started with the freeway number because that was the first thing I thought too. I was like, I wonder where Dave lives. It's like, oh, okay. He lives out off the 405 or somewhere up that way. But so he, I said, do you want to hang out afterwards? And he said, oh, I can't. It's been a crazy day. It was my kid's birthday this morning, and then then we came down and did this event, and I'm going to dinner with Paul McCartney tonight.
Oh my God!
And I was like,
bummer.
I was like, wow. I'm really kind of blown away that we fit into the day that had your kid's birthday and dinner with Paul McCartney on it. In the middle, we went to Fingerprints. So kind of crazy day.
I wanted to mention just for our listeners, some of the other bands you've had there, some of the other bigger names, like Jack Johnson, Chrissie Hynde, Prophets of Rage, Lou Reed, Hello, Portugal the Man, Taj Mahal, The Alarm, Richard Sherman, which I thought was very interesting, Violent Femmes, Fishbone, Tom Morello.
We've also had Brian Wilson a couple times. We had Al Jardine on a record store day. It was one of the most amazing things ever. And it was a little bit like Richard Sherman in that there was a lot of history to it. The musician M. Ward was standing upstairs with me when Al Jardine was playing. And Al, I don't think he finished a song, and he didn't play any of his own stuff to the point that his wife kind of chastised him when he got off stage because he was promoting his own record. But he just played Beach Boys songs, and he told stories about all of them. And it was stuff like, he'd start playing, and then in the middle he'd stop and say, this guitar part right here. He's like, everybody at the time was ripping off like Bach and Beethoven. And I was like, well, what about, I think it was Rachmaninoff, but it was, something that was like kind of a left field, much heavier kind of, and he's like, that's where this riff came from. And he just dissected every song in the middle of it. And M. Ward leaned over at one point and said, I have never seen anybody this candid and, forthcoming about, where their influences and the process. And, we were sitting around Brian's dining room table and, talking about lyrics and throwing names around and, all these stories about where these songs came from. And it was totally magical. And Richard Sherman was similar. He came in and talked about his early days as writing kind of vaudevillian body songs, kind of, I love to go swimming with bow-legged women kind of stuff, which was amazing. So he did like 10 minutes of that, just a medley of these different kind of silly, campy, piano hall kind of songs. And then he went into 10 minutes of instrumental music, which he was there because he had put out on a local label a record of just instrumental piano improvisation stuff. And then he did 10 minutes of probably $1 billion worth of songs where it was, everything from Jungle Book to Mary Poppins to Chitty Chitty Bang. And it was just this incredible. It was amazing. I mean, I and there was 100 people there. Many people didn't know who he was, didn't appreciate the gravity of it. We borrowed an upright piano from the hair salon around the corner, and me and my staff moved it and got it in there in time and mic'd it all up. And it was one of the greatest things we ever did, and I had no expectation for that when we went into it.
My wife and I were at Magic Castle one night, and he is a friend of the owner, and so he was there. And I think she went up and just said, I love you. I love your music, everything you've done, with Disney. And I'll tell you, 5 minutes later, we're sitting at a table with him for probably 2 hours while he just belted out story after story about working with Walt and why Walt didn't want, this version of Small World done this way, or, this song of Mary Poppins had to be changed, and all the story. And he just loved to talk. And we're like, you know what? If this guy with his history wants to sit and talk with us all night, I'm ready to listen.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, and he was, it was a gift that I can't even express how important it was, and yet I felt like we were doing him a favor. Was how he felt about it, and I was just like, wow, this is one for the ages, and he just couldn't say thank you enough, and I was like, what an incredibly gracious, just beautiful man. So yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here. First off, we want to thank our Patreon supporters. It's all about you guys for this brief moment. You guys, you rock our world. We want to thank you very much for being our support system. We have a couple new supporters that we want to thank. Raylene M. Think you know who Raylene. You are. Thanks, Raylene. And Robert H. Thank you, Robert.
Robert
H. So we tip our backstage passes to you guys, and we appreciate your support very much. If you can take the 2 minutes, Raylene and Robert will tell you it took 2 minutes to go to patreon.com. Just search Rock and Roll Confessional and go ahead and pledge as little as $1 a month. It's very easy, it's very quick, and it's very appreciated. So please do that. Or you can go to our website at rockandrollconfessional.rocks and click on the support page, and you can make a pledge through there. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
If you listen to our show on iTunes, please rate and subscribe, and then write a quick review if you can. So, whatever platform that you do, we sincerely appreciate it. I think you already said that. I just said it again.
So, Reed, you have a trivia question that's kind of related to our show today?
Sure.
Give it to us. What is it?
And talks about the Foo Fighters. And so we made it Foo Fighters related. In which Foo Fighters video does Jack Black not appear in? All right. So these are your ones that you can choose from. Learn to Fly, The One, Monkey Wrench, and Low.
So wait, he's in 3 of those videos?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But he's not in one, and we want to know which one is he not in. Is it Learn to Fly, The One, Monkey Wrench, or Low?
Okay.
You got it?
You're going to give us the answer after the second half?
If I remember it, yeah.
God, this is going to go well. So in our second half with Rand Foster, he starts off by telling us about the Record Store Day. If you don't know, is a great time to collect some nice, pretty vinyl. He's also going to talk about some of the craziest events that have happened at the store and what it's like dealing with his business during the pandemic, plus the bonus round. So get ready now for the second half of our interview with record store owner Rand Foster. So can you give us a little brief background on Record Store Day? And, then I want to kind of find out how you guys get involved and how you order and what you can order and things like that.
Sure. So Record Store Day started, I think it's been about 12 years now. It came out of a late night conversation at a convention that included, talking about Free Comic Book Day, which kind of got the ball rolling because comic book stores would get these huge influxes of people coming in for free comic books. And we didn't feel like we could do that. And that was about as far as I saw the conversation happen. But then it kind of came back a little bit later, and, they'd come up with this idea to release limited edition, kind of high demand releases with the idea that they would be around for a day. So the first year I remember, well, let me back up a little bit. So there's 3 coalitions in the indie record store world, and the 3 coalitions, we all have 50 to 70 stores. And that was kind of the core group when it started, was we just kind of did this, and then we opened it out. And I think now it's about 14 or 1,500 stores. It's international. We went from, I think, 40 releases the first year or whatever that number was, but it wasn't huge, to I think we get up close to 600 some years now.
Wow.
We also do a Black Friday event, which is about half that. And it's focused on, the idea was that it'd be focused on Rolling Stones and The Who and things that would really kind of give, indie stores something to compete with the $28 TVs that, happen in the big box stores. So it's worked. And the first year we ordered, we get a list of this is what's available. Again, everything is super limited. And there was a Queen, I believe it was a CD, interestingly enough, but it was a Queen demos or BBC session. I don't even remember what it was, but we talked about it a lot and came to the conclusion that we weren't selling a lot of Queen records. So we probably didn't need to go really big with it. So I think we ordered 10 of them or something. And we got there that morning, not really knowing what to expect. And there was a huge line. I mean, it was probably 100 people. And most of them wanted the Queen record. And we very quickly realized that the reason we didn't sell a lot of Queen records was because everybody had them already. There wasn't anything new. So all of a sudden, here's something new, and everybody just lost their minds. And very quickly we realized this is actually pretty amazing. And we approached it from the beginning like, if somebody offers to throw you a party, you better show up. So we had some bands out. I think it was either the first or second, we had Rob Halford from Judas Priest come in. And he just did photos with people. He signed, some guy had an ice chest with a motor in it that he was riding around on. And Rob signed his motorized ice chest. And it was just, he was talking about his fight record, and he got up and, we did a little interview and talked, and then he just signed stuff for people and took pictures, and incredible, just the nicest guy ever. And growing up as a huge fan and being intimidated by just the whole black leather badass aspect of what metal at that time was, to be like, no, this guy's incredible. And he's so welcoming, and he really appreciates his fans. And it was really eye opening, but totally 100% just a really good, solid guy. But yeah, so then we started having bands come in and play, which, we did other times of the year. But because it was Record Store Day, we started to get some bigger names and, people that had a release. Or, we did one year where we did, we asked artists to pick records that they loved and do kind of a cover set. So there's the band, The Bird and the Bee, and they had done a Hall & Oates record. So they came in and did a set of Hall & Oates songs. And Matt Costa came in and did a set of just things he loved. And it was everything from Townes Van Zandt to the Byrds to, some of his own songs. And it just was really fun and very, it felt like hanging out with friends. And I think everybody kind of felt that way. Yeah. So that was kind of, a little bit of a step in the direction of curating something. And then I think we did Foo Fighters maybe the year after that. And then, we've progressively gotten bigger. We've had Best Coast and M. Ward and Al Jardine and World Party. The Alarm's done it a couple times. The Alarm did it one day where they kind of outdid Phil Collins. So they started at a record store at home in London, flew to New York, did a New York store, and then flew to California and ended the night with us. So they did 3 stores for Record Store Day.
But he also earlier that morning, he went to the studio to record a 45 that got pressed instantly, that he took to each and kind of gave away at each location. He gave away some of the 45s.
They were lathe cuts, so they were, because that's the only way you could do it that quickly. So there was only a few of them. I think we only had 1 or 2 that came to the store, and they did it they tied it into the charity they're involved in. So they did like an auction for it. And I think, if I remember correctly, the store in London wasn't open yet. So he just kind of walked and busked the line and played out front, which is, I mean, just everything about it there, he's another, I have to say, almost without fail, everybody who's come in and played the store has left with me being a bigger fan than when they came in. I just can't get over how genuine and seeing the side of the artist who is engaging with their fans and having kind of this, over their shoulder kind of view in a lot of cases. It's just amazing. I mean, as a fan, it feels like there's all these invisible barriers there. And then, you get them in a setting where a lot of those barriers come down. And that's something I take a lot of pride in, is that people do have a lot of access at these events. And it's amazing to see, both what it means for the artist and for the fan. Because, I think most people see the fan side and forget that the artist side, but, they're so happy and so ecstatic to meet fans and engage with people that it really means a lot on both sides.
Is there a really crazy experience that happened with any of your shows? I mean, that got really out of control?
Probably the closest, there's 2 that I would say that came close to being out of control that were really kind of there. One of them, we had a K-pop band called Super M, which was kind of a super group. And the label called and said, "Do you think you could do a signing for 3,000 people?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" Without really thinking what 3,000 people looks like.
How far around the block is it really going to go?
Yeah, well, you think you have an idea, right? It turns out that we ended up doing 1,600 people because they said that they thought 3,000 was too many. And I said, that's fine. And that was 4 to 5 people abreast all the way around the block from the door going both directions.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you've, seen footage of the reaction of the fans to that band, but it is the closest thing I've ever seen to Beatlemania. I mean, we shot pictures of predominantly young women, and we shot pictures of, women coming in and being very trepidatious and being like, oh my God, I'm going to meet him. And coming out literally like in tears, just, sobbing and so overcome with joy. And and they were great. The band was amazing in that they would, compliment, I love your shirt, or, they tried to give something special to every person, even though there was over 1,500 of them. And we had probably 2 hours or something like that to do the whole thing. So, they were masterful at it, but just seeing the fans be that kind of, it was so much screaming, so many tears, so much, people that just really had kind of lost control of themselves because they were so touched and so, so affected by getting to meet this hero. And then the other one, which again goes to kind of be a testament for the band and their ability to manage things, was over the years, we've done several events with Chuck D from not from Rage Against the Machine, but from Prophets of Rage, but also from Public Enemy. So he came in and did a TV show called Iconoclast with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And the two of them interviewed each other for 2 hours, and they shot it. And it was a Sundance Channel thing. And it was fascinating because they talked about celebrity and they talked about music, and Kareem's dad had owned and booked a jazz club. So they, had all these kind of common points of interest. And then he came back on Record Store Day. He was the ambassador one year, and he came back kind of without any fanfare. We didn't tell anybody he was coming. And we kind of put him, we have a counter that's kind of V-shaped, and we put him kind of at the head of the V. So there was a lot of activity on both sides of him, but he was in this kind of calm spot. And we would just go through the line and pick out people who were buying Public Enemy records and said, if you'd like, Chuck D's here and he would love to talk to you. And so people had this one-on-one experience with him. And we got to be friendly, through doing those events. And I said, you should come and play at the store. And he was like, we will destroy your store. He said, you don't even know, I would love to, but it would be the worst thing you could do. And I was like, fair enough. Thank you for recognizing that.
At least up front, right?
and then a year later, I get a call that's like, hey, Prophets of Rage want to play your store. And I'm like, okay, well, Chuck told me it would destroy my store. But we'd done a lot with Tom over the years. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we did, we brought the capacity down a little bit. We brought in some security that was kind of low key, but there if we needed them. We had one guy who had a little too much to drink, and he, got right up in the front. It was kind of at the end. I think it might have even been the last song, and was, getting on stage and yelling into the mic. And security and I both kind of converged to try to grab him and take him out. And Tom Morello kind of waved us off. And then, like when it would get to the chorus of, I'm blanking on the song title now, but when it would get to the chorus, he would put the mic down and let the guy sing into it, but kind of used it to keep him in place on the floor, and just did an amazing job of managing this guy who was pretty much out of control, and kept everything was cool. At the end of the night, the guy split. There was never any kind of, it was amazing to watch. And it was very counterintuitive to both, their security people and myself, who were like, let's take this guy out of here because he's ruining this for people up front. And it's going to be a fight, which, we fortunately have never had, and still haven't. So, but yeah, those were the two times I felt closest to being a little out of control. And then there was Jack Johnson, I guess, which I have to address. Jack had put out his first record. It was self-released, and his manager team, a member of his management team, was a friend of mine, and asked me if Jack could come and do an in-store. And I honestly felt like we were doing him a favor. I was like, yeah, okay, sure. I like Jack. I've seen him, come as a surprise guest, jump up with other artists, but that was the extent of it. And, so we said yes, and we announced it. And I started getting calls from people saying things like, how do I get there from the Burbank airport? And I was like, why are you coming here from the Burbank airport? And it's like, oh, we're coming to see Jack. And I was like, you're flying here to see Jack Johnson? And it was like, oh yeah, we love him. And that was my first indication we might be in trouble. And then the night of the show, we let me back up for a second. So we're on 4th Street now, but we opened on 2nd Street. So we were in the heart of Belmont Shore. And we did a lot of events, but because it was such an impacted area, we couldn't really get a permit. So everything we did was kind of hoping nobody would notice. And it's like, well, if we don't get a complaint, we probably won't get in trouble. So we didn't even think about it with Jack. We were like, this will be chill. It's this kind of beach and, it's going to be fun. And so we ended up with 800 people in a store that, that really was overcrowded with 200 people in it.
It's overcrowded with 50 people in it. The old one?
Yeah, the one on 2nd. Yeah, that was small.
You'd be amazed what a shoehorn can do. We had less respect for the importance of people having space at that point. We just felt like more people was the right thing. We learned very quickly. Matter of fact, maybe with Jack that wasn't the case. But anyway, so we had a full house. We just started. We talked Jack into doing 2 sets so we didn't disappoint too many people. And he had agreed. And it was right before Christmas. And at the time where Buffalo Exchange is now was an empty space, and we had the keys and we'd stored some stuff in there. So, just after he starts, 6 police cars pull up and the lead cop gets out and he's like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but whatever it is, you're done. And I was like, wait, let me tell you what's going on. And he's like, I'm telling you, my sergeant's on his way down here. And if this crowd's still here when he gets here, there's going to be trouble. I'm like, all right, well, this is what we're doing. Can I talk to him when he gets here? And he's like, sure. And I'm like, okay, what should we do in the meantime? And he's like, well, clean up that line a little bit. I'm like, okay, make sure nobody's got beer. Fortunately, nobody had beer, but we got, the sidewalk clear so people could walk by. And then the sergeant rolls up and he's like, what's going on here? Why are these people still here? And I'm like, hold on. Let me just tell you what we're doing. Said, we got this guy playing. We had no idea it was going to be this big a turnout. We've got a plan. The first set is already playing. I said, the second set, he'll be done in 10 minutes. Everybody in the first room, we're going to move them over into the empty, big space next door to us. And everybody on the street will be in the store or we'll send them home. And he's like, all right. And at this point, there's now a helicopter flying over. There's more, there's
SWAT
more
team on the way.
It was such a heavy police presence. They were, fair to them, this is a town Sublime started in. And, when the police showed up, things usually went bad. Jack Johnson's crowd is very respectful. And fortunately, we're on really good behavior. So the cop says, you know what? You got 10 minutes and you're getting a bill. And I said, well, don't forget the helicopter because that couldn't have been cheap. And he laughed, and we never got a bill. Everything turned over like we said it would. And like 15 years later, he came in to sell me his record collection and said, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm the guy that came in that night when John Mayer was here. And I said, John Mayer was never here. And he's like, no, I remember the helicopter. And I was like, I got a tip for you. It's a way better story. I said, it was actually Jack Johnson. He's like, oh, that's great. So
That's cool.
So yeah, it was kind of funny.
Business can be tough during a normal year. So I can only imagine what this pandemic has been like, trying to operate and still keep the doors open, still keep your staff. You've done an amazing job, but I know it hasn't had to have been easy.
It has not. It's been, we actually came into this, I don't know if you noticed in your trips down there, but the space next to us, which was a parking lot when we moved in over the last two and a half years ago, they started a major construction project. So we had just come through 2 years of, 20%, business down, because of this construction project. And, then we had, 6 months of trying to build things back up, and then we hit COVID. So it's been incredibly difficult, probably is an understatement, but I don't know that it's uniquely so, because anytime I talk to anybody else who owns a store, I realize how universal this has hit, everything from bars to restaurants to, all of my friends in the city and across the country. But yeah, we were closed for 4 months. fortunately, you mentioned at the top of this that, we had a new website. Well, we've been working on it for a year at that point. We kind of scrapped the whole thing, reworked it in 6 weeks. And by the time we closed, we had a website up and running that was full serve because our intent was different when we started it. So that helped a lot. My daughter, who I yelled at for a long time about how much time she spends on social media, talked me into doing sales on Instagram, which I have to say for a period there was kind of the high point of our week. Was we would put up 20 records and, show the pictures, and all of a sudden it's like all 20 are sold. It's like, oh, right on, So it was a lot of rethinking what we do. It was a lot of, how do we approach this differently? We're still kind of in the middle of that. We spent a little extra time when we could open up, making sure that we were doing it in a way that, we're really hard case about people wearing their masks. We make everybody use a hand sanitizer or wear gloves. We're regularly going through wiping and cleaning things. And some of it is just to assure people that we're being serious about it. And I recognize that some of it is just making you see that we're paying attention. But some of it, hopefully is, I'm happy to say we haven't had anybody get sick that's on staff, and we haven't heard about anybody coming through that, has created those kind of concerns. So that certainly is a big part of it. But once we reopened, and it's been, we might be coming up on 6 weeks at this point since we've been reopened. People really, I had some misgivings about it. Just we've been gone for 4 months. Does anybody even still think about us? Kind of insecurities. And we started doing curbside pickup, and I would have, I think it was the same guy, but certainly every day the phone would ring. Are you guys open yet? And I'd be like, oh, we're doing curbside pickup. And he would say, well, I need to come in and touch records and feel records. And I was like, it'll be soon. Hang in there. But to me, that was aloe on a sunburn, because it was like, okay, it's not just me who, appreciates this thing we do. And once we reopened, it was really gratifying to see how many people were really excited about it. And in a lot of cases had been saving up to get back to the record store. And, so we saw, we've seen an incline of, increasing number of people coming through the doors. But when we first opened, really, it was just few people spending a lot of money. So people would come in and buy. It's like, well, this might be my only record store trip for a month. I need a month's worth of new records, So that was where it started. And fortunately, it's continued. People are super supportive. We had our first record store day last weekend since the pandemic, which I felt like going into this year that we did, one of the best record store days in the country, and we had to throw everything out and start over again. And I think that in a lot of ways, the new system we came up with is one of the best in the country. We approached it from first, how do we not have a line, which normally, at 6 a.m. on record store day, there's 500 people waiting for us to open. So that was a huge hurdle to get over, because we didn't want to have to worry that this, we were going to be some super spreader event. It's like, leave that to Sturgis. We'll find another way. So we did, and it worked. And, we found a way to get people in and out. We found a way to, fairly distribute the product so that, everybody had a shot. And I think we ended up with 95% of the people who we did this thing where people sent us a wish list of things they wanted. And then once it turned record store day, we took those wish lists and started filling them as if it was an order. And it was insane amount of preparation, incredible amount of work. But 95% of the people who, told us that they were hoping to participate and these are the things they wanted to get, ended up having gotten something. So I felt like we did it in a really, those were my first no line, be fair, and hopefully do it in a manner that can help us pay some bills and, not have boxes of stuff left when it's over. And, I'm happy to say it, it worked, and we did all of those things. We sent an email out to everybody and asked, how was your experience? What can we do differently? What would make it better? What didn't you like? And kind of went through all of that stuff. We've, gone through most of those now. And fortunately, it was well received because it was very out of our comfort zone. Historically, I've always been looked at what we do as being an experience. It's like we want to provide an experience. Last year, for Record Store Day, we had Chad and Josh from the Chili Peppers come in and play a set of T-Rex covers, and Mike McCready from Pearl Jam and Eric Avery from Jane's Addiction got up and played with them. And so that, from the Foo Fighters to that, has always been the kind of experience we focused on. So to turn it on its head and make the experience, how do we get people in and out, get them home and listening to records, not having them have to have somebody breathing on them while they're doing it. To be able to do that and pull it off was a very abrupt, very major turnaround. And I feel like, again, we delivered the experience we set out to do. So that was kind of awesome.
Yeah, I'd say it was very well organized, and the way you guys set the whole thing up, I thought was extremely fair, and it just made the fact that you didn't have to stand in line for 12 hours to get in there really. I would give up something that I wanted if I didn't have to wait all those hours in line. So, yeah, it was really well done. So I hope you guys keep that up in the future.
I expect we've learned a lot. I mean, if nothing else, going through this pandemic has taught us, it's forced us out of all of the boxes that we felt comfortable in. And, the next thing we're trying to do is, how do we include live music with this? Probably too fast for it to happen for this coming record store day, because there's another one at the end of September. Mm-hmm. But I think by the end of October, we might be able to make something happen. So we'll see. I mean, we've got some ideas. They're not guy with acoustic guitar in the kitchen kind of stuff, which, I think is great, but I think we've all probably seen enough of those for a little while. So we're trying to figure out how to present some live aspects to what we do. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I don't think anybody ever looks forward to having to recreate the business model or recreate all their things that they feel like they've already solved. But once you're in the middle of it and doing it, it is kind of, it's kind of exciting, and it's interesting, and it's challenging, and it's all these things that we thought we would kind of outgrown.
I was going to say, the Beatles and U2 are used to playing on roofs if you want to try to contact them.
We had Matt Nathanson on the roof, but it doesn't carry very well. Our roof is too big, I think. But I do like where you're thinking.
How does somebody get on your website? What's your address? Because the one thing about your store is you send out these invitations to everybody. And when you are able to start up in-store performances again, you have a sign-up sheet. So it's very fair for everybody. How does somebody go about doing that?
Well, the sign up for the website, the website itself is fingerprintsmusic.com. And at that site, there's a button to sign up for our email list, which is usually how we announce. Although we've become a little more reliant on social media, we do still try to make the first pass of people, the ones that have been on our email list forever, which we'd always use. But at one point, we felt like that was a little bit of, we don't have a permit, so we're going to call this a club. And so that was something that we kind of flirted with a little bit. So, we have a really large list, and, we would love to see it get bigger, because that's, obviously our best way to reach people. But yeah, if you go to the website, there's some background that talk, some stuff about the staff. There's, you can order online from us. You can see what's going on for Record Store Day. We're by no means a daily visit kind of record store website. I wish we had the time and the bandwidth and the manpower, but there's some good stuff there.
And you have digital downloads, don't you?
We do have digital downloads. We don't see a ton of interest in those, because I think most people have gone over to streaming at this point that are consuming music through the computer. But we do, and I'm always pleasantly surprised when I see somebody pick something up that I was like, that's not out yet, and then I'm like, oh, they bought the download. Okay, so yeah, it's cool. It's a cool thing.
So help your small record stores. Yeah. Don't always have to go to the big ones.
I appreciate that.
You do a lot of stuff too for the community, like Busker Fest, and I'm sure that you miss organizing concerts and stuff like that.
I do. That's been the hardest part of this whole thing. Is for those who don't know, City of Long Beach 10 years ago, basically gave a friend and I a budget to produce a series of live concerts. And we've done everything from Funk Fest, which, had the biggest names in the funk world, and reunions, and just crazy magical things happen, to My Baby, which is Busker Fest, which is 12 bands playing acoustically, kind of street corner type sets on the back of stake bed trucks. And we've had Cold War Kids and Rival Sons and Terry Reid, the Blasters. I mean, just Mike Watt, Joseph Arthur, just an incredible list of big names, but really the focus is on the local bands. So we bring out, we really kind of spotlight the local bands all day, and then we close out with a couple big bands at the end. Everybody gets wooden nickels. The busking is the British term for people playing music on the streets for tips. And we felt like everybody had money, but not everybody has wooden nickels. So we turned it into kind of a contest, and all the attendees get wooden nickels that they throw. And then the winning band gets $2,500 to help their career, whether it be making a merch booth or pressing a record or paying for studio time, whatever the band needs. We kind of force them into using the money in a business sense, because we feel like they won the contest. They've got the music side down. How do we help them with the business side? Because, that seems to be a disconnect with a lot of bands that, the first band that won, I think, went and bought rounds at the local bar. So, which was great. And,
which was important.
We all appreciated it. But then I woke up the next morning and I was like, wow, they could have done something more long lasting than just give us all a hangover. Yeah. So anyway, that was kind of how that came about.
No, it's very cool. Very cool.
But it is difficult not having that outlet, because, to me, that's we've always done it about right about now. It's always been, heading into or on Labor Day weekend. So, I'm like, I guess summer's over, but, in a lot of ways that was kind of my sign. It was like, okay, time to start thinking about cooler weather and, indoor activities and holidays. And, it's like, yeah, I don't know what'll be the trigger this year. I guess it'll just happen.
That Dolly Parton holiday album.
There you go. Well, I'll tell you what, what the world needs now.
Perfect.
So Rand, at the end of our show, we have what's called the bonus round, where we're going to ask you some quick personal questions.
All right.
Not too difficult. What was your first album?
My first album was a cheap Pickwick compilation of the Beach Boys that had a kind of prototypical Farrah Fawcett girl in a bathing suit sitting on the cover. And when Brian Wilson came to the store, I had him sign it, and somebody in the crowd said, "Did you see that guy with the Pickwick record? Why would you get that signed?" And I was like, it was my first record. I don't want to hear it.
Who would you want to meet you've never met?
Oh, man. Want is such a qualifier for that. My first thought was Bob Dylan, but I've heard Bob Dylan can be challenging, and I don't know that I want. I don't know
to say the least.
Yeah, I don't know that I want that. Let me think. Who do I? I'll go with Bob Dylan, because I've been very fortunate to meet most of my heroes, or many of them anyway.
Just to state, you've never met him, though, right?
Bob Dylan, I have not met. No.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
What can you tell us, Rita?
You've heard all the rumors. But that
challenging.
That leads me to my question. Is like, you had some rave reviews for a lot of the artists that came in and have done some things. There has to be one or two. If you don't feel like saying names, that's fine. But just who was like the most prima donna? Who expected more?
Can I take a guess on that one?
I would love for you to take a guess, because I have a feeling you won't be right. But
I probably won't be right, but I know we went through the same situation with one of yours that performed there, which was Chrissie Hynde.
I knew you were going to say Chrissie Hynde, and I have to say I found her to be delightful. I take a lot of pride in the fact that artists that come with that, I'm difficult kind of disclaimer are the ones that I find that we have the best time with.
Yeah.
Chrissie and I sat in my office for a couple of hours before the set. I just, did a little more fly on the wall. It wasn't like it was the two of us. It was her and her people. And I just kind of sat back there, just kind of hanging out. And we had a great conversation. She was super nice. They were very much from the beginning. They were like, she won't do a signing. She won't let anybody take pictures.
Don't look her in the eye.
Don't wear leather.
I don't wear leather, yeah.
I didn't get the don't look her in the eye.
No milk products.
But so we're sitting up there, and we brought the crowd in, and weirdly enough, I think somebody had thrown away our stage curtains, because we stored them in a trash bag between shows, and somebody threw them out. So when she played, we didn't have a backdrop. And the bathroom that we let artists use is behind the stage. And we'd already let the audience in, and she said, "Can I use the restroom?" And I was like, there's not going to be a good way to do this because you're going to have to, everybody in the crowd is going to see you walk into the bathroom and it's very obvious that you went into. So I was like, we'll go to this other bathroom. We'll work it out. But I'm like, but we still have to go across the balcony. The way the store's set up, it's 2 stories and there's a balcony up above that goes from my office over to the stairwell to go down to the stage area. And I said, they're going to see you. And she's like, stand up. And she put her arm like around mine and pulled me in really close. And she basically stood in the shadow of me and said, walk. And we walked and nobody saw her because they just saw me. And then we got down to the bottom and she used the restroom. We had a different restroom we took her to. And we were standing backstage talking. And she said, you know what? I've been thinking about it. She said, I think I'll sign for people. And I said, well, they told me you didn't want to do that. And she said, but they would like it, right? And I said, I think they would love it. And she said, okay, I'll do it. And I was like, well, let's do this. Why don't you play? And then I'll get up and I'll talk about, the show at the Hollywood Bowl, and I'll talk about the new record, and, I'll look over, and if I see a thumbs up coming out of the door, we'll do the signing. And if I see a thumbs down coming out of the door, I'll wish everybody a good night and they'll never know that it was a possibility. And she was like, okay. And then she did a signing and she was great up until a lady kind of pushed her way in and was kind of obnoxious. And then she said, okay, I'm done. Sorry, everybody. And she started walking and she said, walk with me. And she signed stuff for everybody as she walked back to the backstage area. And we got back there and she said, will you go out and see if there are people out there that need something signed that didn't get it?
Wow.
And I was like, yeah. And she was amazing. And the label called and they were like, what did you do? I was like, I didn't do anything. And they were like, we heard she signed. And I was like, she did. It was her idea, and they were just flabbergasted. So I don't know what the catalyst was, but to go back to your question, probably the most difficult person, and I feel okay sharing this because A, he has a reputation about it, but B, it was very educational to me, was Rivers Cuomo. We did an event with him he did a record called Demos, the home recordings. And it was all of the songs that, he had done demo versions prior to them becoming Weezer songs. And so he came in and the idea was really out of the box and really, really a fun idea. Basically, he didn't bring a band. He came dressed as a train conductor. And everybody in the audience was asked to bring an instrument. So you had to sign up to be in the audience with your instrument. And then we got in there and he had a giant whiteboard and he said, he said, we're going to start alphabetically by instrument. Anybody have an accordion? Somebody's like, I have an auto harp. He's like, what song do you want to play? And that was how we did it. And we wrote this 15-song set list. And then he would bring people from the audience up and it's like, okay, we got somebody with a banjo that wants to do Butterfly and we're going to do that. And then he's like, everybody with a guitar, come on up. And the guy's like, I just wanted to do it, the two of us. And he's like, okay, let's do that. But he got there and he was, we need to turn the lights on. And I was like, it's really vibey with the lights off. And we worked really hard to make it feel kind of like a venue. And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, I play in a venue every night. I want this to feel like I'm playing in a record store. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. So a lot of times in my experience, the people who they have a reputation for being challenging. It's because they've spent a lot of time thinking about what can go wrong or how do I want this to look or how do I want it to feel? And then it doesn't always get articulated. And it's only when you kind of push it a little bit. We had Damian Rice, who subsequently my friends have had him and talked about it being difficult. But for us, he was slow. And I was like, hey, Damian, we've got a lot of people outside waiting in the sun. It was an afternoon thing. And he sent over this list that was like, you need to black out the windows and you have to burn a certain type of incense. And we need this, there has to be a display behind the stage of Damian Rice stuff. And then, it was 15 points. And my staff was like, this guy is such a jerk. And I said, but look at what he's asking us to do. I'm like, all of these things are only going to make the experience better. There's nothing on here that's ego. I said, the closest was he wanted a display behind the stage of him. But that was because I'd seen pictures in somewhere else that he played and it was Madonna behind him. which is just weird. And then I was like, I get that from an aesthetic standpoint. Why would you want to be promoting Madonna at your show when there's no connection there? So I mean, he was incredible. But at one point I was like, Damien, we're really nitpicking the sound here, because he was saying he heard a bass trap, which at the time I didn't even know what that was. So, I was just like, well, you're being a tweak, and you used to be a sound guy, so you're overthinking it all. And again, he looked at me and he said, we're only going to do this once. We should make it really good, right? And we'd recorded it that day. And it turned out that he ended up getting in trouble with his label because, we spent $300 recording him live at Fingerprints. And a month prior, Warner Brothers had spent $100,000 recording him at Glastonbury.
Oh my God.
And he wanted to put out Fingerprints. But my deal with them was we would pay for the $300, but it had to come out as an indie store exclusive. So then Warner Brothers was like, well, we spent all this money. We need to put this out. And he was like, no, this is the one. This captured me. This is where we are. So he had to do all this, kind of backstage trading. We'll give you this record you can put out for everybody else, and then this one goes to the indies. And last I heard, there was a couple 100,000 copies of it were sold. My cousin, who I'd fallen out of touch with from when I was a kid, was like, wait, you on Fingerprints? Is that the one where Damien Rice played? And it was just one of these crazy things that. So I don't think I've run into anybody who I thought was really a prima donna that I couldn't trace it back enough to figure out what the root of that was. We had another guy that even his crew was complaining about how he wanted the air conditioner turned off. And in talking to him afterwards, he's like, I have an old guitar. If it gets too, if the temperature's changing, I can't stay in tune. And I was like, well, that's totally reasonable. Why don't you tell people that? So, I haven't had anybody who I felt was really just, that I was like, I won't do that again, or that I felt like they were a jerk. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for, bringing integrity back to owning a record store. I mean, it means something, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons you've been in business for so long, is because you put yourself in the position of a person who's a fan, who like going to record stores. How can I improve that, experience for them? And Fingerprints is so special, and I appreciate you for, letting me be part of it, because I live in Long Beach, but also, your website is great too. So,
well, thank you. And I have to say, the first time you came in the store, we all kind of fanned out when you left. It was like, oh my God, that was Rita. We've listened to Rita for so long. And it was like, why is she in Long Beach? So, mutual admiration society. Well, thank you.
I still fan out with her.
It's kind of awesome. It's nice to connect these disparate dots that, kind of different parts of our lives. And usually Rita was me in the car, or me, kicking it by the stereo. So, yeah, it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I just want to know where in Northern California you were from.
I grew up in Cupertino. I wasn't born in Northern California, but I grew up there. So I was South Bay, Los Altos, Cupertino.
Were you there when K-San was around?
I was there when K-San was around. I was more of a KOME, KSJO listener, because
that's true.
They were a little bit more rock and roll.
I had my first internship was KSJO.
Really?
So
that was the first radio station I ever went into, and it was I had won a contest for some sampler record that was imprinted with the station name. And I had gone in, and Dire Straits had released their first record, and they played somewhere in San Francisco, and they gave them a giant cake that was the shape of the Dire Straits guitar logo thing.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow that ended up back at the radio station.
Wow.
And whoever helped us, when I was getting my record, said, you should take some cake. And I don't know what the long-term thought was, but not unlike a newlywed, that stuck in my refrigerator for way too long because it was Dire Straits cake. And so that is where I come from. It's just, kind of stupid. I have a collectible piece of cake in my freezer for, many years of my childhood. So.
Do you still have it?
No, it didn't make it through a move. Well, I appreciate
All right,
this.
Rand.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you both for
Thank you
you
having
so
me.
much.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful 3-day kind of sort of weekend.
I appreciate it. You do the same.
All right.
Thank you.
Rand. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was a nice little ditty with Rand. It was great to hear from him.
It was, and I really appreciate how articulate he was discussing some of the, concerns that would go on with an artist and the location and the, police and you, CW. I know that you always organized a lot of, Mark and Brian events and stuff like that. And, you deal with police, you deal with,
Fire marshals.
And lawyers and lawyers and lawyers and lawyers. So,
One day we'll talk about one of those special events, I think, but not today.
Not today. It's all about Rand. But just a wonderful guy. If you're in Long Beach, you can check him out. And no matter where you are in the world, you can check him out online. Fingerprints Music, all right, in Long Beach. Cool.
And you can follow Fingerprints at Facebook at Fingerprints Music, Instagram Fingerprints Music, and Twitter Fingerprints LB, like Long Beach. Go to our website, Rock and Roll Confessional, to check out our show notes. It's a great place to learn a bit more about the subjects that come up in our conversations. As Rita said earlier, if you listen to us on iTunes, please rate, subscribe, write a review, which again will only take a couple of minutes of your life. And we appreciate every little bit of help, right?
Indeed. We appreciate everybody who listens and participates. Now, let's go to our trivia question. What do you think?
What was it, Reet? How quickly I forget.
In which Foo Fighters video does Jack Black not appear in? Was
All
it
right.
Fly, The One, Monkey Wrench, or Low?
I honestly, I'm not one to be able to answer that, but I'm going to take a guess and say Low.
You're wrong.
Of course I am.
Monkey Wrench. Jack Black appears in the beginning and end of Learn to Fly as a janitor in the clips from the film Orange County and in The One, and as a hillbilly in the Low video. So it's Monkey Wrench.
Okay.
To me, it just, it continues that theme. Last week's question was Talking Heads question. It had a monkey in it. That will be the answer.
I guess whoever's writing these has got an issue.
So hopefully you got that. If not, you can, like CW said, go back and watch all the videos.
Please follow us, like us, share us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And keep rocking, because we'll be back in a couple weeks with another fantastic show. So anyway, keep rocking, and you'll hear from us in a couple weeks.
And stay cool. And thank you, firefighters and first responders and everybody. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye.